What's up, Bookman fans? Bookman back with another book review today. And for this installment on the series on the channel, we are going to be talking about Age of Myth by Michael J Sullivan. And this is the first book in his prequel series. Um, when I went to Books a Million to find a Michael J Sullivan book, because I will be going to a con later this month that he will be attending, and so I wanted to read some of his work in case I might get signed by him. But this was the only one they had, and this is from the prequel series. But it's online; you could start from any point in the series. So we picked up Age of Myth, and we're going to talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. All right, so for those who are interested and might want to give this book a read, but I don't want any spoilers, a brief synopsis of Age of Myth. We follow a couple point of view characters. One of these characters is known as Wraith, or he's also given the title God Killer. Uh, this is because he's grown up as a rune, which are the humans of this world, and they are sort of been conditioned to believe that the Frey, which are like elves, are these godly figures that you really can't touch. They're just so far above the runes. Um, when his father crossed a river, which puts them into rune territory, which is illegal, the one of the Frey kill his father, and then Wraith's like, "Why would you do that?" And but then one of the slaves of one of the Frey uh, catches the Frey off guard, hits him over the head with a rock, and he falls on the ground. And then I think Wraith finishes the job and kills him. That's how he gets the title of God Killer, and that's sort of the inciting incident of this book that sets everything into motion. We also follow a couple other characters. We follow a mystic, sort of like fortune teller type, like voodoo character, um, and her name is Suri. So we sort of get to see some of the magical elements of this world through her, and we also follow the perspective of a woman named Persephone, who is the wife of a chieftain of her clan. She's a rune. All these people are runes, by the way. She's also a human, and so we get to see like what the day to day human life is like, how their civilization is ran, and we also get the perspective of a lady named Arion or Arian, and she is a Frey, and so she's like, but she's one of the special. Okay, I'll get into that later, but she's a Frey elf, and so we get the perspective of what their civilization runs like as well, and also a peek into how their magic system works. For the first part of this video, we're going to talk about what I liked about Age of Myth. Now, Age of Myth, a fantasy book, it doesn't, and I mentioned this in my Instagram post, of course, shameless plug, follow my Instagram, please. It's on the same name as this YouTube channel. But anyways, to get back on track, Age of Myth, it doesn't really reinvent the wheel of fantasy. You got your common tropes. You have the elves, the humans, you have the dwarves. They all go under different names in this series, but they're sort of the same archetype. You got the classic world building that occurs in a fantasy series. We got the magic that comes with a fantasy series. We got the more like this setting reminded me more of like a Roman, even more modern, like BC type of setting because this is like the legends of this universe. So it takes place pretty far back in time, but still in the vein of fantasy. It's taking place in the past. Um, but Michael J. Sullivan does some really nice things in this familiar setting that he does pretty well. One thing I'd like to know is his humor. I think this book actually did have me. I didn't like outwardly laugh, but I was LOLing inside for sure. I gotta cut that out. Yes, I did just say LOL unironically, but I think the humor in this book is pretty good on occasion, and that's one thing that is kind of lacking in the other fantasy books I've read. Like a long series like Wheel of Time has the occasional humor, but sometimes it doesn't land for me. And that's the same with other fantasy I've read. But this book actually does have some humor that I thought was pretty funny. There's one moment, I don't know if this was intentionally supposed to be funny, but we'll save that for later, maybe in the cons section of this video. All right, editor's note. I did not mention it later in the video, so I'm going to talk about it now. The scene in particular I'm talking about is there's a certain character who I mentioned earlier uses a stone to like knock it over the head of one of the Frey, so Wraith can kill him. There's a later scene in this book where the characters are in another pretty like tough predicament with a pretty strong character that they're gonna have trouble taking out, and same character sneaks up and hits her in the head with a rock again. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it was supposed to be funny because the next line, the characters are sort of jabbing at the rock hitter. He's like, "Okay, so is this a habit of yours?" Or which I thought was pretty funny. Um, does it take a little bit of energy or like gravity out of the situation? A little bit, because this is a pretty serious character we're dealing with. They just got hit over the head with a rock. Uh, but if that was supposed to be funny, I found it to be pretty funny. So that was another strength of Sullivan's. World building was good in this book as well. Of course, there's not anything crazy unique compared to other stories, but there is its differences, and Michael J. Sullivan handles the world building pretty well on most occasions. It doesn't feel too info dumpy. There are occasions where that does happen, but for the most part, pretty good world building here. The dialogue between characters, and maybe this sort of falls into humor, but I did really enjoy how the characters spoke to each other for the most part on most occasions. The dialogue was really nice, and sort of dressed like the writing style. This was definitely a change in pace from reading like a more literary work in my last review as Beloved. I tore through this book pretty quick once I picked it up and really locked in. I finished it pretty quickly, and that's part of it. Is the writing style is pretty accessible. Um, it's not too hard to sort of understand how Michael J. Sullivan's voice works, and get along with it, and take the ride through this book. I was thinking of Elantris a lot when I was reading this book for some reason. I think their stories are a little bit different, the content, but also like Elantris, we have 3 point of views. In this book, we have like 4 or 5, but we have like 3 central point of views. And the writing style of Michael J. Sullivan, I think, is similar to Brandon Sanderson's, it being more like simple and not too poetic, which that isn't a complaint or like a nitpick. That's like just it works well for the story being told. It makes it easy to get through, and you're already dealing with a new world fantasy, and so you're trying to communicate these new ideas to the reader. So keeping the writing style simple is never a bad thing to do. Character work was pretty decent in this book as well. I wasn't particularly drawn to any of these characters, but that's not an indicator of me hating the characters or thinking the character work was bad. I felt they all had their own charm to their character, and their own motives were clear. So I think the character work was also decent. Now to transition to the negative side of this review, some of the things that this book that I found, left me wanting more, or I think could have been executed better. I think one thing is this book has a lot of twists near the end, and I had issues with these twists for two reasons in particular. One being that they all sort of happen at the end of the book. There's a lot of twists happening, which you know, on the surface, sounds like it should be a positive, right? Because a lot of twists, a lot of intrigue near the end. But with the amount of twists that sort of occur, it sort of, I guess, diminishes the value of them as a whole. Because it's like, oh, there's a twist. Oh, there's a twist. Oh, here's another twist. It's sort of like there's not one central twist that we're sort of like, whoa, like that's like, you got me there. Because there's multiple going on. So it's like, okay, it's hard to give one the care and attention and value that it needs if there's multiple going on. And another thing about the twists is some of them I don't want to say cheap, but some of the twists it felt like maybe could have been set up better earlier in the book. One example, and this is a spoiler warning, so skip. I'm not going to put a time card, guys, but like spoiler warning. There's a character earlier in the book. They enter this sort of like dwarven cave, and we see that this cave is unique because it has like growing, glowing green light, and there's like these like certain like calligraphy, like runic, like symbols written on the walls and stuff, and it's pretty cool. And I was wondering, like, so what's the importance of this like cave? It gives a little bit of history on the world, but that was kind of its purpose for the time being. Skip forward to near the end of the book. Um, we find that these sort of runics have a power to where they can deter the elves' magic, so their magic won't work on them. And how we figure this out is a character puts these runics on one of the other character's shield, and he puts his shield up and it blocks the magic. And you're sort of like, whoa, that was cool, but like why? That wasn't. And then after the battle's over, one of the characters mentions an offhand, like, "Oh yeah, like I've been in that cave since I was a little kid, and like anytime I try to use like magic in there, like it doesn't work." And I think that's a super cool idea, right? I wonder if maybe though the first time they're in the cave, talk about a character or mention a character trying to use their magic in that room for some reason and it not working. That gives us sort of like a little teaser. It sets it up more. It's like, oh, okay, well, there's something special about this place. So when he does use his shield and block the lightning or whatever that gets thrown at him, um, it feels more earned. I guess is what I'm saying there. There was another twist where we find out that one character is the mother of another character, and this was a nice twist. But the thing with this one is the character. It's supposed to be an endearing moment, and it is partly an endearing moment. But I didn't get the full, like heart wrench of it because the mother character wasn't really a central character in this book. She was more of like a tertiary character, like mentioned every now and then, played like a very insignificant role. So when I find out that she is the mother, it's like, oh, well, that's nice. Like I'm glad she got to see her daughter. But then again, it's like I don't necessarily feel like a strong connection towards this character. So I wonder if maybe this character could have been incorporated more into the story. And then, so when that moment does come, it tugs on our heartstrings more. It's like, oh, we have a connection with this character. So get to see her daughter, is going to have a greater impact on us. Another gripe that I had with Age of Myth is with one character in particular, and that is the sort of big bad character in this book, the like central antagonist, the one who's sort of centered around the final battle of this book. Um, I think he was an interesting character. I think that we are kind of overly spoon-fed why he's acting the way he is, and why he's his personal philosophy. We're given a lot. We're told a lot that like, hey, I'm doing this for this reason, and I'm evil, and I'm doing this for this reason. And that was something I sort of picked up on, earlier in the story. Like, okay, so it's just this particular character has sort of like a Randian sort of philosophy, or it's like the people, if you have access to the power, if you can gain the power, then you should be the ones exercise it. I forget what the particular philosophy, the specific name of it, but and so this character is part of he's a Frey, part of the Elven clan, but also he's part of a subsector of the Elven clan that can use magic. And I liked that the wizards in this book were like saw themselves as higher. Most of them did, because I feel like if magicians or wizards were in the real world, I mean, it's hard to not have that perception when you're using magic and throwing fireballs around. You might see yourself as better than the people around you. So I like that angle, but this certain character, his sort of philosophy is, we're stronger than the rest of these people, so like I should be in power and rule everybody and tell them what to do because I have the power to do it. And I picked up on that earlier in the book, but I think Michael J. Sullivan may spend too much time reassuring us, like, hey, he's evil. This is why he's evil. And there's a section where he's talking to the Prince character, and he like sort of elaborates on his philosophy for like a whole page. It's like by this point I sort of get it. I get why he's acting the way he is. Like maybe a little bit too much of reassurance there by the author. And that was like a nitpick that I had with that character and his specific characterization. My last minor nitpick about Age of Myth is maybe I wonder if there could be a little bit more showing instead of telling. I know that's a popular writing advice that everyone likes to throw out there. I guess what I mean by this is sometimes when describing the relation between characters, maybe show a physical action that shows that they care for each other instead of telling me that they care for each other. For example, there was one character who hadn't known this other character for a while, but he was coming to like her. He coming around to accepting her and being friendly towards her. And then Michael J. Sullivan tells us that he's like he was starting to come around to like her. I wonder if there's a way maybe you could show him coming around to like her instead of telling us. And there was a few examples of that throughout the book, but it wasn't anything egregious that took me out of the writing because I finished this book pretty quick and I thought it was a decent book. So overall, guys, to conclude this video, if I had to rank Michael J. Sullivan's Age of Myth, I'd probably give it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. And I know that sounds like awful, but for me, like a 2.5, I say would be like average. I would say that Age of Myth is an average book. It's not doing anything revolutionary or super intriguing or interesting. Um, but it also isn't a terrible book that you're going to put down 10 pages in or DNF it, as the booktubers bookstagrammers say. Because like I said myself, I got through the book pretty quick. I thought it was a decent read. um oh yes, okay, so who would I suggest this book to? I think so a lot of people will say Mistborn, the first Mistborn book, for an entry into the fantasy genre, and of course that's a great recommendation. I think I'd also say Age of Myth, though, would also be a good way to sort of, here's me with the mass market paperback edition, a dying breed right there. But I think it's like it goes over all the fantasy tropes. It's easy to read. I think that Age of Myth, for someone who's interested in maybe stepping outside of their normal genre and trying fantasy, I think Age of Myth would be a good point to start at. It's not going to be too overwhelming for you to read. I also think maybe someone who is looking at another trilogy to get into a fantasy series, but they want, maybe if you've read all the big name authors and you're looking for something from maybe a lesser mentioned name in the sphere or whatever. I'm not familiar with Michael J Sullivan's game. Maybe he's super popular, but I would recommend this too. I think if you're looking for something different from an author maybe you don't hear as much about, I would definitely try to give Age of Myth a try as well. And that'll be all for this video today, guys. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully, I'll have another book read by next week, so I don't have to do a movie review. And I'll see you guys in the next video.